Hello everyone, it's me Jenny and it's time for another Not Naked video response to Trisha Hershberger's series Naked Truth, where we talk as candidly and as truthfully as possible about the subject of Trisha Hershberger's choosing. Technically straight out the shower, no makeup, those people choose to do it naked, I choose not to. My hair is dry because instead of filming this directly out of the shower, I fell asleep directly after getting out of the shower, so it's been about 3 hours since I showered, but I am not wearing any makeup, I haven't done anything with my hair, I just fell asleep on top of it. Yeah, today's subject is an enormous one, so I'm just going to crack into it. Before I start, I have to say that I haven't actually watched the full video. I haven't watched the edited video, which is under discussion, mostly because I physically haven't had time, but also because the subject that has been raised is an enormous one in its own right, and it brings up a lot of issues regardless of the original source material that inspired this discussion. And to be honest, the only one I would have had time to watch would have been the edited one, which, to be honest, I'd rather keep my mind out of the specific situation and discuss the three major themes that are brought up in this debate. The first one I'm not going to actually discuss because Trisha said she wanted to avoid the pro-life, pro-choice debate, which is a really, really difficult one anyway, so I'm going to just scoot that to the side and try not to bring it up, although it might come up in this debate. But the other two big issues that have been brought up in this video are media, media bias and media propaganda, and medical practice and medical law and well-being. So starting from the media place, it is impossible for any media outlet not to have some sort of agenda or bias, because every single person on the planet has an individual agenda or bias based on how they grew up and what they've been exposed to in life, and who they've talked to and what community they're in and what country they're from. Every single person has an individual bias on pretty much any subject because everyone has an opinion on something, and that opinion can be more fluid than others, or it can be very, very set in stone. And when you move up into places that have extreme power, like political parties and newspapers, that bias becomes a mass bias, and that is a very complicated thing, particularly when it comes to things like newspapers. When I was if I was talking about GCSE or A-level language analysis, critical analysis is not saying something is wrong, but it is thinking critically about something. It's about looking at both sides of each text, each phrase, each sentence, each document, and really seeing what's woven into that, and that's both in terms of the individual language use within the piece and within the background bias of the time period and the associations between who has written it and what they have said in other debates and what they've said in other contexts. And really learning to understand and think critically about pretty much any source of media, particularly things like newspapers and documentaries, is, I think, a really desperately important life skill. Things like documentaries always have a specific agenda, and learning to understand and see where agendas have a better balance, where they have multiple sides to one argument. There's always, as I said, there's two sides to an argument. There's the one side, another, and somewhere in the middle there's usually some semblance of truth, although obviously there is a huge amount of bias and a huge amount of difference between each side of an argument. So I find it very difficult to watch documentaries because there is that agenda. When it comes to newspapers, it's much more hard to see the bias unless you're talking about some of the more stereotypical, for example, news channels, which tend to show their bias quite strongly, particularly in things like political matters. So generally, media bias is something that people really need to be looking out for and really looking for agendas. So in this particular instance, obviously, the company that has produced this video has that bias. It is within, on the opposite side of the argument, which I'm avoiding, and it is very much structured and produced in such a way to create a very specific context and a very specific statement about what's being said. What is being said may or may not be true, or may be very true, but it's been presented in such a way that it has got that specific bias, and learning to understand that and be like, help the context influence how you perceive the media that is being put at you. I think that's a really, really important skill. Other things that come into this specific example is the fact that does a non-moral action justify exposing a truly amoral action? Because in this case, obviously, there is some wrongdoing going on, there is something going on that is not right. Whether or not it's simply language and miscommunication, like something has been said that has been warped, and something has been said that maybe is not in the most sensitive way, but has been done in something that out of context seems incredibly wrong. Versus, if that's an expose of something really, really bad, does filming it legally, does producing it in such a biased way justify that action? And that's a very, very complicated moral quandary, because it's a circle. Does a negative action justify the expose of an even bigger action? And of course that's a huge thing that's like the Snowden debates. Obviously enemy of the state, not obviously my state, but it's one of those things. Does an expose, is it, depending on your language, is it a bell ringer, whistleblower? Is it that a good thing or a bad thing? And obviously with this particular example, there is a bias. There's a very clear bias. There is a very clear agenda with this video, both in how it's produced and how it was filmed and what is said and how it was done to put across that agenda. Does that mean that the expose is any less valid? It sadly enough kind of does. But that's not to say what's been said doesn't hold balance as well. So that's a very complicated moral quandary, and it's something that I think everyone needs to think critically about these sort of things. It's not just one thing or the other, it's this whole loop. And I'm so glad I'm not a lawyer, because I don't want to have to deal with the legal aspects of if something is found through illegal means, does that still hold legal tender? But there we go. The other really big issue, again, getting aside the pro-choice, pro-life debate, and it's going to be really hard during this segment, is medical research and that sort of thing, and legal medical practices. Obviously different countries have different legal standards, and trying to not bring in my personal thing, I think that there is a fixed point, and there should be a fixed point in the time period for abortions. I think that, I can't remember what the specific term Trisha used, but like halfway through birthing abortions, I don't think they are legal, and I don't think they should be made legal. I think there has to be some level of, regardless of how you feel about the situation, there has to be a cut-off point at some point along the line, and that's not the debate that I'm talking about. The debate that I'm talking about is, if we're going with adult people, they have the right to donate their body to science, and if they didn't donate their body to science, to medical research, to organ donation, everyone would be so much worse off. If we didn't do medical research on dead people, on tissue samples, if we didn't do that research, we would be in a very, very difficult place. And that's coming from someone who, my grandfather was a doctor, my grandma was a doctor, my mother was a nurse, and my twin sister is a doctor in training, and I hope she doesn't watch this, because I don't know whether or not she'll be happy with me telling that to the internet, but she's come home from her medical placements and she's talked about, working on cadavers, and she's told me details I don't want to know, and I don't ever want to know. And she's talked about how they feel when you're working with these things, which is not things that I want to know personally, but I know that if it wasn't there, if there wasn't that practice, everyone would be much less well off in terms of medical research. The doctors wouldn't be so well trained, we wouldn't know half as much, even a minuscule amount of medical research we do, and fetuses and human tissue do hold a huge amount of value if donated to medical research. When it comes to the morality of this, it's very, very complicated, and trying to take away the pro-life, pro-choice debate is incredibly hard. There is a lot of really important stuff that can happen with tissue samples, which help progress medical research incredibly. And if we're going with the adult context, people have the choice as adults to donate their body, to donate their tissues, to donate their organs. When it comes to the right of an unborn child or an undeveloped fetus who would not survive without the mother, if it's a point where if the mother were to die, the fetus would too, and the only choice I'm trying, oh, it's so hard not to bring in the pro-choice, pro-life debate. Anyway, if the person who is responsible for that fetus knows what is going to happen to that tissue and consents, and it is legal and it is safe, and there is moral obligations of both the person who is dealing with this situation from a medical practice, from a legal practice, and from a personal practice, as long as there is moral and legal and ethical decisions made and it's all above books, it is all, you know, people are informed and they know what is going on and they give their consent, and I don't think money should be involved in this particular situation, then I think it's okay. But in this particular context of this video, it was not okay, because it was not above books according to this video. It was not morally right, it was not legal, and it was not consensual from any party. And I think that's where the debate comes in, and I really, this was a really, really long video and a very, very detailed discussion, and I probably missaid many things because there's so many ideas that are part of this particular aspect of this video, which I said is 3 enormous, hugely, like, 10 video long debates, with a lot more research and a lot more knowledge than I personally have, and a lot more experience than I personally have, both from a medical standpoint, a legal standpoint, an ethical standpoint, and a moral, like, just, it's such a huge debate. I can't cover it all in one video, and I won't really attempt to, but there we go. That is my 5 cents, as people say. I hope it made any sense. I hope I haven't drastically offended anyone. Feel free to leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. If you disagree with anything I said, please just tell me, but try and be respectful. Try and, you know, I will respond to comments if I can, and there we go. Just understand this was a really difficult subject. It is a really difficult subject. It will always be a really difficult subject. And trying to take out certain aspects of this entire specific situation is incredibly difficult to do. So there we go. This video is way too long, so thank you for watching it. I'll see you guys all next week for another Naked Truth, except you won't, because I'll be at VidCon and filming in PJs in my hotel room. Might be awkward, I don't know. Maybe I will upload it, I don't know. Anyway, bye for now.